Archbishop Tutu Mamphela would have wanted to be here with us because as one of Tutu's successors and a pastor of the flock who is actively committed to contributing to peace in the Middle East. So because he couldn't come in person, he's asked me to read a statement to you so that you know his take on this occasion. This is what he says. Last week I joined Bishop Sithembele Sipuka of the Catholic Bishops' Conference and Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, the General Secretary of the SABC, on a solidarity visit to the heads of the Christian churches in Jerusalem. We were also joined by Reverend Dr. Tyrone Pitts of Churches for Middle East Peace in the US. And our visit was very helpfully supported by our ambassador to Jordan. In Jerusalem, we heard of the pain and suffering that has resulted from Israel's razing of much of Gaza to the ground, in a war in which more Palestinian civilians have been killed than in 2 years of Britain's notorious bombing of Dresden during the Second World War. We also heard of the deep longing of the Palestinians for peace with justice and reconciliation. I welcome the UN Security Council's unprecedented 14-0 vote this week, adopting a resolution which calls for an immediate, full, and complete ceasefire in Gaza, for the release of Israeli hostages, the exchange of Palestinian prisoners, the withdrawal of Israel forces from populated areas in Gaza, the return of Palestinian civilians to their homes, and the safe and effective distribution of humanitarian assistance at scale throughout the Gaza Strip. Israel and Hamas must accept the resolution immediately and unconditionally, failing which all who supply them with weapons must apply a comprehensive arms embargo against them. We in the Church thank the Tutu legacy organizations, the Tutu IP Trust, and the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation for their daily act of solidarity with the Palestinian people by displaying the kufiya-clad statue of our Archbishop Emeritus outside of the Tutu House. As South Africans, we must not waver in our support for the end to Israel's occupation and the complete liberation of Palestine. There is no room for compromise on this issue. The future of Israel and the security of his people lie only through achieving justice for the Palestinians. This is what the Most Reverend Tutu Mamphela, the Anglican Archbishop of Cape Town, has to say. But as I said, this is a continuation of Archbishop Tutu's ministry. In 2014, an article which I won't bore you with was published in the Israeli press, Haaretz.
Sorry?
And I will only quote you. I just want to quote you one paragraph from that article of 2014. And this is the Arch in typical fashion. He said, I asked the crowd to chant with me. We are opposed to the injustice of the illegal occupation of Palestine. We are opposed to the indiscriminate killing in Gaza. We are opposed to the indignity meted out to Palestinians at checkpoints and roadblocks. We are opposed to violence perpetrated by all parties, but we are not opposed to Jews. This is important. This is not about being for Palestinians and against Jews. This is about peace, which neither party can have without the other. Now, with that, I would like to invite our first panelist, Judge Albie Sachs, to make some comments, and then it will be followed by a link we are establishing, which is why there was an echo, with Dr. Tanya, whom I'll introduce at the time. Justice.
Easier to submit.
Switch places.
Would be easier.
It's easier for Muhammad to go to the mountain.
It is indeed.
I'm going to tell 3 short stories. I'm attending, this is an interfaith occasion, and the first story, 1969, I'm in exile. I'm in Prague, and my hosts asked me, would I like to visit the Jewish cemetery in Prague, not far from where they were staying. And I go there, and it's an extraordinary cemetery because for hundreds of years Jews were buried there in a ghetto, and it created a hill. That was moving, part of human history. But then the guide took me to 2 little synagogues, shuls, and they were filled with materials from synagogues all over Europe. And she explained that Hitler had decided to create that cemetery with these 2 museums as a museum to an extinct race. I went back to the house and I wept. And I wept and I wept. I was then married to Stephanie Kemp, and she said, well, it's not just for you, all humanity. I said, it's for all humanity, but it's for me. I lost uncles and aunties and grandparents in the thousands or in the hundreds in Lithuania. I never got to know them. They were just wiped out because they were Jews. It's part of my existential being, and it's very deep. That's the first story. And it also makes me feel, how do my generation respond to the Shoah? And for many of us, it's with a profound and deep hatred of injustice, of oppression. It was so unimaginable that that could happen. And it's unimaginable that any human being can treat other human beings with disrespect and disregard. And if anybody should have a particular hatred of oppression and unnecessary violence and killing, it should be Jews. Other people with that same historical experience have responded in different ways. But to me, it's no accident that you see names like Feinstein and Cohen and Levy now being at the forefront of the demand for permanent ceasefire and the creation of an independent Palestinian state. The second story is a little earlier, 1963. I'm in solitary confinement, Maitland police station, not too far from here. And the only book I have is the Bible. I'd never read the Bible. I'd grown up in a very secular home. And now for the first time, I'm reading the Bible. And I'm hoping to get solace from it. It's my only companion. It's the only thing I can do. It's solitary confinement, nothing to do, no one to speak to. It's an awful, terrible existence, that total isolation. And I read, and I find, to my disappointment, so much of the Old Testament involves smiting enemies. Even that story of Amalek, I couldn't believe it, down to destroying to every living creature. I couldn't believe it until we come to the Song of Songs, a beautiful period of poetry, and I think it's no accident, the time of King Solomon and Sheba and an African connection that I found very, very beautiful. And then smiting again, and then the exile, and then the most beautiful passages, the prophets. And the prophets now speaking out to the world, to the whole world, the lion laying down with the lamb, turning swords into plowshares, and identified so strongly with that. And I'm feeling the Jewishness in me that's so profound is a Jewishness that's related to the dreams of the prophets. And I think it's no accident when I think back, what connects me to 4,000 years of Jewish history is Karl Marx, who wanted to revolutionize humanity for justice. It's Albert Einstein, who wanted to revolutionize the cosmos for understanding, and Albert Einstein, who wanted to revolutionize our understanding of ourselves. And I always add, because to be a Jew without humor, it also includes my Auntie Rosie's teiglach that we used to get every Rosh Hashanah. Without food, without humor, you can't be a Jew. The third story is going to Gaza. It was 2001. The Kennedy School of Government invites me to take part in a workshop in Gaza. I'd never been to what I call that part of the world. You even give it a name, you're taking a stance. Is it Israel-Palestine? Is it Palestine-Israel? So I call it that part of the world. But to go to Gaza, invited now by the Kennedy School of Government, I felt I can now go to that part of the world. And we land in Tel Aviv. A Christian Arab driver from the representation in Ramallah is there to meet me, and every time he goes through a checkpoint, I feel he shudders. He shudders. It reminded me so much of South Africa. Eventually, we end up in Gaza, a lively, spirited workshop. One of the speakers saying, I was imprisoned by the Israelis, and now I've been imprisoned. You were fighting injustice, and now you're fighting against the people, fighting for self-determination. Wonderful, powerful debates. And it comes to my turn to speak, and I say, this is the energy you need for a new constitution, where people speak their minds openly, a good foundation. And I'm not going to comment on the situation in that part of the world. I speak about Nelson Mandela, and my idea is really to oppose what I thought was a very autocratic style of leadership in the PLO, and I say how he appoints us to the Constitutional Court, and 6 months later we strike down measures by Nelson Mandela, and he accepts that the Constitutional Court, the Constitution, overrides the President, and he must show respect for that. And I said we were fighting not for power, we were fighting for dignity, and the people all applauded. Shortly afterwards, a message comes, before we leave, can Dr. Albie Sachs come to Ramallah to meet Yasser Arafat? And I say, of course, and we go through the checkpoints, Ramallah, into that compound we always used to see on TV, and there's Yasser Arafat looking just like Yasser Arafat, with his stubble and his scarf, and he comes up to me and he kisses me on both cheeks and says, "This man is a hero." The next day, I'm in Jerusalem, and I'm sitting on the Supreme Court bench next to Aaron Barak, who's been the judge on the International Court of Justice. And I didn't hide from either where I'd been and who I was seeing. And I felt only a South African can have that experience, where I can go openly and contact people warmly on both sides of the divide. And it occurred to me then that I understand. I'm not a Zionist. I've never been a Zionist. I didn't grow up in a Zionist family. I don't like the idea of any state being associated with a particular faith or religion or orthodoxy. Not a Christian state, not a Buddhist state, not a Catholic state, not a Muslim state. That's not my view. But I understand where Israel comes from. I understand why so many Jews identify with Israel. In their hearts, it's part of who they are, it's part of the way they see the world, it's part of a reaction to this historic persecution. I understand all that. I don't share the outcomes that they support, but I understand where it comes from. And I certainly don't support the idea of the destruction of Israel. There are 6 million people living there, mostly Jews, and the idea of the destruction of that state and those people horrifies me profoundly and deeply. At the same time, I'm a freedom fighter. I was in the struggle. I was thrown into jail. I was blown up because I was a freedom fighter. I support the Palestinian struggle, and I envisage one day not a weak, subaltern Palestine dominated and controlled and not causing any trouble, but a strong, proud Palestine. If Israelis were really sensible and thoughtful and forward-looking, they would welcome a strong, proud Palestine as a neighbor, sharing the holy spaces, sharing trades, sharing tourism, sharing so much that's so Semitic. Often you see people speaking passionately on the TV, and I can't tell, is it a Palestinian or is it a Jew? I can't tell. There's something that's part and parcel of that regional culture. And it occurred to me that if I can one day be an intermediary in the way that South Africans were intermediaries in Northern Ireland, in Colombia, in Sri Lanka, 3 places I've been to, if I can be intermediary, then I would like to be an intermediary. So I don't sign on to petitions, much to the dismay of certain people I know. I don't take part in campaigns. I don't identify in that sense as pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-Palestinian. I'm not anti-Israel. I believe Israel exists. It's a reality. It has a right not to be destroyed. But I welcome the day, I look forward to the day when there are the kind of negotiations that we had in South Africa between people who'd been trying to kill us. I met the man who tried to kill me. It was bitter enmity, not just disagreements. And we were able to find a solution, and I hope that one day I might be in a position to serve as an intermediary.
Thank you very much, Judge Albie Sachs, as always, powerful. We are hugely indebted to you and your contributions. This is truly what it means to be human. Religion doesn't define us. What defines us what defines us is our humanity. And so with that, I would like us to now turn to Dr. Tanya Hassan, who is a pediatric intensive care and humanitarian doctor. She spends half her year working with Doctors Without Borders and has served on medical missions throughout Africa and the Middle East. She has been visiting the West Bank and Gaza Strip for over 10 years to teach medical school students alongside a group of doctors and surgeons from Oxford University. As a founding member of Oxford, she has helped develop various teaching opportunities for Palestinian medical students. Throughout that time, she has built a long-standing relationships with Palestinian medics and stands in awe of their commitment to their patients and profession. As a medical doctor, I often wonder how they cope, but they do. In an urgent effort to amplify the voices of medical profession in Gaza, she, along with 2 other colleagues, set up the Gaza Medic Voices, a social media platform for medical professionals from Gaza, and they're able to share their harrowing and painful experiences firsthand so that it becomes a healing platform. Dr. Haj Hassan has been serving as a spokesperson for Doctors Without Borders on Gaza since October 2023. In that capacity, she has attempted to share with the world the immensity of the catastrophe that has unfolded in Gaza. We now would like to turn to her. She's on a link for us to hear her story.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be speaking in your setting, knowing the courageous stance that South Africa has taken globally in fighting for rights of people everywhere, because nobody's free until everybody's free. I want to speak briefly about the healthcare status in Gaza, and as well as the systematic targeting of healthcare and healthcare workers. From the very beginning, and then I'll speak briefly about the humanitarian situation. I was last in Gaza in March, and I'm hoping to go again next month. And what I witnessed there was nothing short of genocide, and I don't use that word lightly. Unfortunately, I was forced to be based at one of the smaller hospitals in the middle area of Gaza, because the major hospitals in Gaza, the hospitals where I often teach when I go, have been reduced to rubble, including Al Shifa Hospital, the largest hospital in Gaza in the north, and Al Nasser Hospital, which was not functioning at the time that I was there. Hopefully, Gazans are trying to get up and running again after it was besieged and attacked. And then all the pediatric units, Rantisi, Nasser Hospital, that have been besieged, attacked, and targeted in various ways. If you draw out a map of the Gaza Strip and all of its hospitals, north to south, you'll see that slowly every single hospital has been targeted in one way or another, either through deprivation of resources, direct besiegement, direct shelling, and even bombing. To the point that the largest hospital in Gaza, what Gazans refer to as its beating heart, Al Shifa Hospital, which in Arabic, Al Shifa means healing, has been reduced to complete rubble. It has been flattened. After it was besieged twice, and after a deep investigation by the Washington Post confirmed that it was not, in fact, a base for Hamas, which is the accusation that was being made by Israel. So we've seen a systematic targeting of all of the hospitals in Gaza. We've also seen a systematic targeting of healthcare workers who have been killed at an unprecedented rate and even executed at point blank. There are over 500 healthcare workers to date that are confirmed dead, killed by Israeli forces, and there are over 240 that were abducted and detained since October. Those who've been released provide chilling testimonies of physical, psychological, and sexual torture and abuse. And when asked what crime they committed during detention, they report being told that they are part of Hamas when they insist they are not, that they treat Hamas fighters when they insist that they would treat anyone that came through their door. That is what they do as healthcare providers, and they don't know who are fighters and who are not, but it is irrelevant to them. And they are told that they are essentially the scum of Gaza. So there's been a very clear and direct targeting of healthcare, be it healthcare workers or healthcare facilities, to the point where we even have photo evidence of MRI machines, CT scanners, and ultrasound machines that have been intentionally destroyed, ultrasound machines whose cables were snipped, were cut, so they cannot be used. These machines are not a threat to security. They are a threat to the preservation of life and health for the Gazan population. I'm sure for most people present in your room, you follow all the other ways that health has been systematically targeted. So everything that's indispensable to human survival, from food to water to shelter, safety, sanitation, and healthcare, have been targeted in various ways, which leads you to only one conclusion, that this is a strategic attempt to terminate life. And life of all categories of the population. Perhaps most affected are the subgroup of the population that I am specialized in treating, that's children, who are vulnerable members of society. And when I was there, I saw scores of children come in dead, gasping, maimed, dismembered, burned, to the extent that they were unrecognizable by their own family. One child I received in the emergency department had the side of his face blown off, and in the bed right next to him was his sister. However, 90% of her body surface area was burned, and he didn't know it was his sister. And he kept asking about her and asking about his family, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that the girl in the resuscitation bed next to him was his sister. In fact, I think we were even resuscitating her on the floor at the time because there's no space with all the other casualties that came in. The rest of his family was killed in that same attack. He asked about them every day, and he told me over and over again that he wished, in a very sort of mute, stoic tone, I wish I had died too. And this is the reality for 1 million children in Gaza right now. A significant proportion of the pediatric population has been killed or will die as a consequence of the conditions brought about by Israel's strategy on the Gaza Strip, which makes sustainable life almost an impossible goal. Children today, the pediatric ward, so the non-trauma ward, the pediatric ward at the very small hospital where I was based was packed with children suffering from epidemics of disease, hepatitis, pneumonia, diarrheal disease and illness, and most recently, a scare yet to be confirmed of a cholera outbreak, which will lead to even more uncontrolled death. Everything has been said by myself, by multiple humanitarian organizations, by the International Court of Justice, by the International Criminal Court, by the United Nations, and we are left in a situation where we are screaming to deaf ears. We have every organization, law, and system in place to prevent these atrocities from happening, atrocities which have happened in the past, and we have vowed as a human race not to let happen again, are happening with complete disregard and disrespect to the rules, to the laws that protect humans, frankly, from each other and from each other's violence. And so I would be very, I would probably need at least 3 hours to go story through every tragic child tragedy around children that I've experienced in Gaza. What I can say is that the pediatric hospital population that is alive, that is not buried under the rubble, unable to be retrieved, is starving, is suffering from epidemics, is maimed. There's the largest global population of amputees, child amputees is currently in Gaza, and are orphaned. There are over 17,000 orphaned children who've lost one or both parents since October. We have the list, their names, how many parents, many of them both, that they've lost since October. This is a stain on our collective humanity, and it is something that we're going to have to reckon with for generations, decades, and even centuries to come, the same way we've had to reckon with atrocities in the past. And so I implore you, particularly the journalists in the room, I'm sorry for the noise, particularly for the journalists in the room, I implore you to go back to your journalistic integrity, something that has been so lost globally in the way that this has been reported, and report what's actually happening on the ground. Find ways to go into Gaza. We have stopped talking about the fact that the reason we don't know the details of what's happening in Gaza is because, one, we don't listen to the Palestinian reporters or trust them. I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the global community that is sharing realities on the ground on mainstream media. And two, in a very unprecedented way, journalists have not been allowed, international journalists have not been allowed into Gaza, creating a black box where atrocities can be committed without witness, external witness, without any international independent party presence. And evidence will go missing, will be buried, will be forgotten, and we will end up in a situation where the same atrocities being committed today will be committed repeatedly in other areas of the world, because we're slowly descending on a very slippery slope into an era of humanity where there are no red lines that are severe enough for global powers that be, including the United States and many parts of Europe, to say enough. My one hope is that the global South, which has stood up in a beautiful and powerful way to say enough, we are done with the colonial history of this world, will continue to stand up the way South Africa has, and will inspire the people of the global North to follow suit. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanya. It's a very powerful and painful account, which speaks to each and every one of us. Because when the children are a target, we have a major intergenerational catastrophe on our hands. I think it's appropriate that Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, of Gift of the Givers, will follow Dr. Tanya, and then after that we'll have Reverend Mpho Tutu Ramphele, who will also be speaking to us through a link. Doctor.
Thank you, Mamphela Ramphele, and to the Foundation for setting up this event, and thank you for all the speakers. I just want to pick up on some of the points that everybody else has raised. One of the big issues to me is what has happened to our humanity. That's the first question. This is symbolic of a humanity that's collapsing, that's lost all spirituality, that's lost all values. Number two, the situation on the ground is very clearly explained by this medical doctor who's been there. I just want to give a little additional points to that. My staff, I've lost, the team members that work with me have lost 175 family members. The head of my office was deliberately targeted on the 16th of November after a morning prayer at 4 a.m. A missile struck the mosque where he was praying, killed him. He's a pharmacist, and his brother was a doctor. My teams who've been working on the ground, I can't explain their resilience. They don't know the condition of their families. They don't know where they are. They don't know where they're going to be in delivering, but they carry on delivering in any case. The team member who passed away, the head of my office, had a premonition that he was going to die. And he said that I will not give up what I'm doing, but I'm not going to move from Gaza City to Rafah as we've been told. As we're asked to move, we get bombed on the way and we get killed. It's total indignity. I would stay in my apartment with 30 of my family members and my 3 children and my wife, and I'll wait to die as a non-combatant martyr, like other people have died. And 4 days later, he died. That's what happened. They told me from the beginning it was very difficult to move around. Our 6-story child and women and child care center, which is a center for women and children, was bombed and totally destroyed. Our medical center in Khuza, totally destroyed. The preschool that we're looking after near Khuza, totally destroyed. Our 3 desalination plants, totally destroyed. Trying to get aid in now, no medical teams are allowed. My teams are on the border right now in Egypt. No medical teams are allowed in. Every hospital, 35 of them, have been virtually non-functional, destroyed, bombed, attacked second time. 10,000 bodies are lying under the rubble. There's danger of spread of infection and contamination, spread of cholera, hepatitis A, skin infection, chest infection. There's 90% of sewage is gone. 90% of the people in Gaza are drinking sewage contaminated water, which spreads the disease, and more people will die from disease than from the bombs. You can't get medical equipment in, you can't get medical supplies in, children are dying from starvation. I mean, this story just goes on, and all we know the story. I want to come to something more serious. When 9/11 happened, it didn't take long to move an entire military into Afghanistan. Why is there not an equal type of approach here? Iraq was bombed on the premise of a lie well documented, and an entire nation was flattened. Madeleine Albright, when she was asked, the American Secretary of State at that time, when she was asked, is the death of 500,000 children worth it? She said, yes, it's worth it. Is this the kind of mentality that's going on again? And the one country that stood up and challenged the world was South Africa. So I'm going to bring it home, and I'm going to be very blunt and very direct. The ANC government must be very careful about what partnerships and what coalitions they make in this country for a new government. Because I don't want the Lady Pando to be removed. I'm actually asked the President to reinstate her. He has a choice of 2 cabinet ministers. He needs to bring her back, because what gave South Africa status and recognition in the world, what all our flaws and our corruption and all the mess that's been going on in the country, what gave us status and recognition, like the World Cup of '95 with Swatara winning, the Mandela wore the green jersey and showed reconciliation. The World Cup of 2010, Sepp Blatter said FIFA World Cup was the best ever run in the world. And of course, with all that kind of recognition, yesterday at the branding award in Johannesburg, SA brands were recognized at events. And one of the events that was recognized was the ICJ. That momentous decision to take Israel to the ICJ was something critical. And if the government changes, if the foreign minister, this international relations minister changes, do we stop that process? The one country that has been consistent in talking for human rights, for Western Sahara, for Iraq, Dumisani Kumalo at the United Nations in Mbeki's time when he was the United Nations ambassador, South African ambassador to the United Nations, spoke about not invading Iraq. This one country that couldn't keep the lights on, can't deliver water, has all kinds of problems, has stood out for the whole world in terms of human rights and humanity and justice. So a direct call to the ANC, very careful about what coalitions, what partnerships you wait, because we cannot stop this process. There has been no government, no institution more brave than what South Africa has done. And a call to the liberation movements in Parliament to stop fighting, stop having egos, and to stand together as liberation movements in the interests of the people of our country, the continent, and the world. You've said, Manila said, we owe it to the Palestinian people. We don't owe it only to the Palestinian people. We owe it to all people. As human beings, as the spirit of Ubuntu, we owe it to all people. What happened in the Holocaust should never happen again. What's happening in Rwanda, should never happen again. What happened in other parts of the world should never happen again. And what's happening in Gaza should never happen again. We keep saying never, 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 but it still keeps happening. And that brings me to the last point. Is the United Nations relevant? Do they serve any purpose? In any other country, they could send their military, they could send NATO to bomb Gaddafi. They went into Iraq, 42-country coalition against a state where there was a lie. Are they relevant? and South Africa has been questioning that. Is the Security Council relevant? Is its powers too much? Veto powers in affecting humanity? I think it's time for the African Union to disengage from the United Nations. I think it's time that South Africa should push to move out from the United Nations. And I think we need a new body driven by the Global South, a body that will challenge imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy, imperialism, every type of crime and chaos committed in the world by Western nations. It's time to stop that, and I think South Africa, with the right type of government, can do that. A government that's not compromised by political parties that support Israel, it's not going to work. And I'm calling again strongly for the liberation movements, the trade unions, and everyone to make sure that that kind of coalition does not happen in this country. That's the only way we'll have peace, only for South Africa, for Africa and the rest of the world. My team's on the ground. It's very difficult to get, they need tents, they need shelter. 26,000 tents were given to us. You can't move it in. Medical equipment is required. You can't move it in. Yes, we got some stuff in. We got items in for the first 60 days. We bought everything inside. And then we started getting trucks in from the outside. It's not a gift of we give us the rate. The rate at which we move, we can move hundreds of trucks, but it can't be done. And when it gets inside, it can't get to where it's supposed to get to, because there's so much obstruction, bombing, challenges, roads gone, no transport, no manpower, no labor, fear of getting attacked. 29 January, we saw that child, Hadid child, being bombed. She got killed when the paramedics tried to save her. On 29 February, the Flower Massacre. Those are small examples of great massacres taking place. I agree that, both states need to survive, both states need to live, both states need people to work together, and we need strong international support. And I agree with Judge L.D. Sachs that if he wants to be a mediator, many people like him needs to go forward and bring this mediation process, because loss of life doesn't benefit anybody from either side. We are all losers when it comes to loss of life and war. So I applaud South African government for taking the stand at the ICJ and the ICC also, and I ask them to carry on with that process everywhere in the world that we're getting feedback from. The comments, the support, the praise for South Africa for what we've done, because we've done something what nobody else in the world has done. Why? You see, Israel is quite used to not being challenged. They carry on with impunity, doing what they want because nobody challenges them. And when I spoke to the ICJ lawyers, they asked me, have we achieved anything? I said, winning in the court is not important. Taking Israel on is important. Because you're not taking on Israel, you're taking on America, Zionism, Europe, Western imperialism. And look at what has happened. How many countries subsequently have joined South Africa and the ICJ? Would that have happened if South Africa had not started the process? And that's why we want South Africa to make sure the international relations minister is the same one that was there before, which is not on the list, but Cyril Ramaphosa, you've got two choices to bring in two candidates you want, and I'm asking you publicly to make sure that Nelly Pando is back there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Imtiaz, speaking from the heart. We know that hurt people hurt people. We now have Reverend Mpho Tutu Ramphele. Is she online or is she only? Okay. We would like to welcome her. She's linking to us from Germany, and she is well known as the person who was always on the side of the Arch, and their co-authorship of important publications, and her support of his ministry, particularly when he became a legal poorly. And so it is appropriate that she joins us as we remind the world of the unfinished business of peace in the Middle East that the Arch worked tirelessly for.
Good afternoon, and thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak now with you, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of such an esteemed panel. I think that, like me, many of us at this time in our world really miss the Arch, miss his voice, miss his courage, miss his passion. But I want to note, my father died at 90 years of age. Throughout his life, he had many periods of illness, many periods of devastating illness even. But he always had access to medical care. Sometimes the medical care was not top flight, but always it was available. Today, Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan told us in a modern world in 2024, had my father been in Gaza, he would not have lived through childhood. Children today in 2024 are facing the devastating consequences of war. Not because we don't have the ability, not because we don't have the capacity, not because we don't have the resources to provide for their health, safety, and well-being, but because we can't be bothered. But because we are willing to allow America and Europe to send bombs and planes and guns and bullets to destroy the medical facilities that exist or that existed in Gaza, because we're willing to turn a blind eye to the refusal to allow teams of medical personnel in to go and provide the care that children need, because for some reason, even though it's never supposed to happen again, it's happening. That we're allowing a genocide to happen on our watch. On our watch. We say again and again, never more, and never more. And yet somehow, more and more and more. There must be peace. There must be a ceasefire. There must be a ceasefire that leads to peace with justice. History did not begin on October 7th. History began long ago. And our care and our concern for the people of Palestine, and our care and our concern for the people of Israel, demands that we must work for justice, because that is the only way we will ever achieve true peace. God bless you all, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Sisi. Uthethe kamandi. Kwinto ebuhlungu kodwa ke. That's why we are here. We are here to bear witness to this excruciating, unfolding catastrophe in front of us. Nkosi, it's appropriate that ke usivalele ke Madiba. Nkosi Zwelivelile Mandela, uyaziwa, she's known in his own right as not only a traditional leader, but also a man who has represented us in Parliament. And so we would like to hear those words of wisdom which will bring back the voices of our ancestors and their wisdom at this moment when we need all the wisdom we can harness.
Enkosi Mama Ramphele for the invitation to be here at the Tutu Foundation, the respected members of the media, fellow panelists, some being my elders. It is an honor for me to be here this morning, particularly when we speak to a cause and an issue that was close and dear to the founding father of our nascent democracy and our global icon, His Excellency President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. My grandfather used to always say that as far as there is one single human being suffering in the world, our work is far from over. So allow me to not praise a fish for swimming and say that as much as we applaud our government and His Excellency President Ramaphosa for having taken the Zionist usurping entity to the ICJ, it is our duty. Madiba made a commitment to the Palestinians on his visit in 1995 and respectively in 1997 when he said our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. In his demise, we are that generation that has picked up the baton to ensure that we deliver on that commitment and we liberate Palestine in our lifetime. Therefore, our government is duty-bound to ensure that it becomes the voice for the voiceless and the oppressed nations around the globe. Therefore, we need to look into what can we do as ordinary men and women in South Africa in ensuring that these atrocities do not continue unchecked. We seem to have been neutralized by the ICJ case and have been reduced to cheerleaders and not focusing on the work that ought to be done. So allow me to ask the question on, do we as South Africa have an embassy in Tel Aviv? Because my last account is that the president called on our officials for a consultative process. And an embassy is not made up only of foreign delegations that are posted there, but of locals. So who is in the building in Tel Aviv that serves as a South African embassy? Who is mounting that office? Are they Palestinian or Zionists? While you are looking into that question, for the longest time, I think, during the tenure of the late DSG Comrade Jesse Duarte, we used to march on the embassy in Pretoria and call for that embassy to be shut down and the ambassador to be expelled. I dare pose the question, is that embassy going to be shut down by the South African government, as much as it has been able to rush to the ICJ and the ICC? Will they be able to expel the Zionist usurping entity out of South Africa and send the ambassador packing? Many countries such as Brazil, Colombia have done it, and we would like to know if His Excellency President Ramaphosa will take this on the home ground and not on international platforms only. But also we need to look into what our government is involved in when it talks to maintaining relations with the Zionist usurping entity. Through the Department of Transport, we have El Al, the national airline, flying into OR Tambo 5 times a week. Ireland has banned El Al and rejected it from flying into Ireland, showing their solidarity with their Palestinian brothers and sisters. Is our government in solidarity with the Palestinians? And will it lead by example? That has been shown by the likes of Ireland. But also we continue to see ongoing trade between South Africa and Israel in agriculture, as well as the latest one that we've been exposed to with Colombia banning all coal trade with Israel. It has been exposed that South Africa, 9% of its coal goes to the Zionist usurping entity. So we pose the question as activists on the ground and a grassroots organization as to when will we cut ties with the Zionist apartheid state of Israel. We have, through the Ministry of Defense, the Foreign Military Assistance Act that prohibits any South African from picking up arms internationally. We've had the Honorable Minister Naledi Pandor speaking on platforms that these South Africans that are aiding the IDF on their return to South Africa will be arrested. They are singing our national anthem while participating in genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Yet, right here in our shores, actually right here in Cape Town, in Sea Point, we have these very same Zionists that have been butchering and killing Palestinians since 2014. We have 149 cases that we have brought before the ministry, and to date, there's been no single arrest. Therefore, we need to truly do an introspection as to are we doing enough in ensuring that we are able to stop the genocide, to have an immediate ceasefire, or are we just complicit in the cause? I want to appeal to South Africans, as well as grassroots organizations and civil society, to rise to the occasion and ensure that we leave no stone unturned in getting involved in simple acts that can make a real impact. You know, during our own struggle for liberation, a young woman at 21 years old, Mary Manning in Dublin, refused to handle grapefruit at Dun's store. She was joined by 12 of her co-workers and they protested. This became a global campaign, not only in Ireland, but it was supported as far as San Francisco Bay, Lagos, Manchester, Liverpool, and many other cities. The dock workers in San Francisco Bay refused to handle any ship or any produce coming from South Africa. We therefore want to call upon the trade unions, particularly our dock workers, to look into the ships that are coming from the Zionist usurping entity and the produce that is leaving South Africa destined for the Zionist usurping entity, so that we play our part in ensuring that we prevent enabling the genocide being orchestrated on a daily basis against our brothers and sisters, comrades and friends in Rafah, in Gaza, and occupied territories in Palestine. I want to say that as the minister is not on the list and it is said that she's resigned, we must understand that we have no voice in government that truly speaks for the Palestinian cause. And therefore, we call on the president and government to look into picking up the baton where she left off and continue doing that work of being the voice of the voiceless. But also in Parliament, as many parliamentarians that have stood side by side supporting the Palestinian cause across political parties, we call on them as we establish the 7th administration to make sure that in the 7th Parliament, the Palestinian cause continues to be a priority, continues to be on the Parliament's agenda, so that we can do more on the national landscape, but also focusing on the SADC region. As the SADC Parliamentary Forum, we can be able to play a role, but it is also a chapter taken from our very own struggle for liberation, where our frontline states supported us to the hilt until we attained our freedom. We therefore want to say to the Organization for Islamic Cooperation and the Arab League of Nations, they can learn a lesson from our frontline state, and instead of normalizing with the Zionist usurping entity, they too can stand shoulder to shoulder with their brothers and sisters and support the Palestinians in attaining their freedom in their lifetime. But lastly, let me also appeal to young people around the globe. It was a turning point when we witnessed during the Soweto uprising youth denouncing Africans as